Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today we're going to talk not about the boys of the Fantastic Four, but about the female component in the Fantastic Family, Invisible Woman, aka, and who I'm going to refer to from now on as Sue Storm. So Sue Storm got her Future Foundation uniform, and she gets a pretty modest uniform effect of 10% energy attack, which was actually listed at 15% on the patch notes. So a lot of typos lately for Netmarble with the CTP selector, and then multiple things like Silver Surfers, 10 bios or 20 bios, etc. But anyways, moving on. It's a 10% increase to energy attack, which is pretty small, but there were quite a few changes to her 3 skills. Now, usually when 3 skills get changed, there's some minor changes here and there, but these skills have all been changed in multiple ways, whether it's the number of hits, which equals the number of damage, or it's the actual effects, or it's the cooldown, how many seconds of skill cooldown is on each of the skills. So there's actually quite a bit to cover and go through. But first, I want to address something that the community has been reacting to in regards to this uniform, and it is the idea that she's not good for PvP. I've heard a lot of people say, man, this new uniform for Sue, I thought it would make her better for PvP because she was kind of a fringe PvP character before, and now they're saying that it makes her worse. And while she does have a little bit less survivability with this uniform, I want to say I don't think Sue Storm is made for PvP at all. I had built her for PvP previously before she got a uniform. I had changed her 4th gear option. I had given her a CTP of regeneration. I had really tried. Her Uru wasn't built for PvP, but pretty much everything else was built for PvP. And I couldn't really get her to work very well, and this was right around the time of Jean Grey's tier 3, but even before that, and I don't think that she's going to get any better now, and I don't think she's going to get any better in the future. So I'm just going to start off by saying I think Sue Storm is a PvE character and or a support character for her various debuffs, for her charm and for her all defense down with the 3rd skill. I think Sue Storm is like Scarlet Witch. Whether you think that she's good for PvP or not is up to you. You might have a different opinion. You might disagree with me. You might say that this regular Sue Storm is great for PvP, but the more I test her, the more she just basically gets 1 or 2 shotted. Her invisibility doesn't help her because so many characters now have lingering attacks that leave something on the battlefield. Jean Grey's 5th skill with that orb. So there's really no way to escape. And she doesn't have any defenses whatsoever. Her uniform didn't offer her any defenses besides the regular uniform, all defense, the 21%. And even though I gave her attack speed, even though I gave her HP, even though, I tried various different situations and setups for her, it just doesn't work. I was even running with a PvP team that consisted of her, Victorious, and Wasp to give her 40% additional HP. She's almost at 50,000, and it's not enough. She just cannot hold a candle. So I'm not even going to cover her PvP potential because I honestly think that the devs want her to be a PvE character, and now I'll make my case for why I think they want her to be a PvE character. So let's take a look at the actual changes. In terms of her skills, she changed 1, 4, and 5. Those are the 3 skills that got changed. Now, the regular Sue Storm without a uniform, I'm going to list out the skills and I'm going to list out the damages. So the first skill was 5 hits, 64% damage with an added skill damage of 442. The 4th skill was 7 hits with 135% with 365. And then the 5th was 25 hits, 200% damage with 1067. Now, if you look at the new uniform, the new skills for 1, 4, and 5 for Sue Storm, you can see that she does more hits on all of the skills. She goes from 5 to 13, she goes from 7 to 26, and she goes from 25 to 59, more than double the number of hits on a single target between her old 5th skill and her new 5th skill. Now it is less, almost half the damage. Instead of 200%, it's 108%, but the fact that it's more than double the hits means it's going to make up for that damage because it still has the same amount of bonus damage. Now, the iframe on 5 is the same, the no iframe on 4 is the same. The only thing they removed to actually weaken her survivability a little bit is they removed the iframe on 1. Now, the iframe on 1 with her old uniform, it's delayed iframe, and honestly, the damage of that skill is so low that you would almost never use the first skill anyways, and you wouldn't use it in PvE, so I honestly don't think it matters. And they've made some changes so that now you can insta-cancel 1 and 4, and they will still continue their effects and their damage so that you can continue and you can chain attacks, which supports my theory of a PvE character, possibly with a CTP of energy for all the chain hit, because she now deals close to 100 hits with just 3 skills, 1, 4, and 5. Don't even get me started on 3. That thing alone has like 40 or 50 hits. It's a hitting machine. The other big change is that for whatever reason, they removed 1 second of immunity from her 4th skill. So instead of having 5 seconds of immunity, it's now down to 4, which seems like a really weird, petty change to make. Additionally, they made the bind on her 1st skill 3 seconds instead of 2 seconds, but then they made the bind on her 5th skill 2 seconds instead of 3 seconds. So I feel like, to be honest, the devs made a lot of small, insignificant changes to the skill effects. I'm not talking about the hits now. I'm not talking about whether it's an iframe or the skill cooldown. I'm talking about the bind and the immunity. I feel like they made these small, insignificant changes to make it look like they were actually changing the skills in a meaningful way, but in practice, it really doesn't matter. Shifting the 2 to a 3 or the 3 to a 2 is moot, and 5 seconds versus 4 seconds of immunity is really not going to matter. And those of you that are going to complain that, oh, it destroys her PvP potential, buddy, if she wasn't surviving on 5 seconds, it doesn't matter. If she's not surviving on 4 seconds, it really doesn't matter. So that's kind of also moot. But it's just kind of weird that they made these changes for no reason. 2 seconds of burn damage really doesn't make sense to me. And then overall, I do think that she does more damage. And I'm going to illustrate that despite the fact that I have a PvP set. The last thing I want to point out before we get into some action, because there's actually quite a few changes to Sue. So if you purchase this uniform and you equip it, you might feel sort of weird that you're playing a different character. She feels quite different to play now, is that the cooldown on her 4th skill and 5th skill have changed dramatically. So up from 13 seconds, her new 5th skill has an 18-second cooldown, which means it's adding 5 seconds or 2.5 seconds when you have max skill cooldown. Additionally, her 4th skill went up from 12 seconds to 16 seconds, which adds an additional 4 seconds or 2 seconds when you have max skill cooldown. So even with max skill cooldown, she has an extra 4.5 seconds of cooldown between these two skills in the overall rotation. So what that essentially means is you can't do rotations that kind of mash a lot of skills together. You have to do more of a traditional rotation where you just use one skill. You use each skill once. The only one that's possibly up for sort of spamming at the beginning and at the end is her 2nd skill because of that charm. But now let's jump into some actual gameplay. Now that you know that she can skill cancel better, that she does more damage now, I want to prove it to you and basically make the case that Sue Storm is really just a PvE character, and we shouldn't force her into the box of a PvP character just because she has the invisibility that Spider-Man 2099 does. When Spider-Man 2099 was meta, there was no iframe ignore. There were very few characters who could, you know, get out of webbing and this sort of thing, and so getting those free hits off with invisibility was really meaningful for him. Nowadays, even though Spider-Man 2099 got a great uniform, huge damage boost, and he got you know, changes, his invisibility hasn't made him meta again. He's still on the fringes of the PvP meta, if there at all. So I just want to point that out to you guys who think that Sue Storm has to be meta because of that. I'm probably to blame as well for hyping that up too much, that 4-star passive or a tier 2 passive. We may have overstated its value. But we're going to do a damage test here. We're going to go into a stage 20 Ebony Maw, and we're going to go in with the new uniform. We're going to use Hyperion's 45% all attack, and we're going to use Coulson for the crit rate, guaranteed crit rate, and the damage against villains. And we've got the crit rate dodge there. We're not going to use any strikers to interrupt us. Coulson might strike for us from time to time, but he really does extremely insignificant damage, so it doesn't matter. And I just want you to pay attention to the bars of damage. I'm going to use pretty much the exact same rotation. I'm going to do 2 cancel into 3, and then 4 cancel into 5. So we're going to do that there. We're starting with the 2 to make sure that he stays still. So we're going to do the full 3, and then we're going to insta-cancel 4 into 5. And you can insta-cancel 4 into 5 now because of the way that the skill functions. 4 is really great now that you can just insta-cancel it. You do lose the 50% damage proc increase. Sorry, that's something I forgot to mention on her 4th skill. That was a big change, but I don't think it matters because they gave her more damage overall. So as you can see, she does not quite a bar and a half. She does about a bar and let's say a third of a bar, or a bar and a fourth. So 1 and 1/4 bars with that rotation using her new uniform. So one more time, just to clarify there, because I did forget that, although it's in my notes there ahead of me. Her old 4th skill did provide her a, oh come on, where are you, Sue? Her old 4th skill did provide her with a 50% damage proc increase, increased damage by 50% for 1 attacks, which is basically a damage proc, but it's a 50% damage proc. Her new 4th skill does not have that at all, and it's nowhere else. So I just want to make that clear. But even though she's missing that, I do think that Sue Storm is still going to do more damage for you now than she did before with her old uniform. So laying to rest the conspiracies that she does less damage now. She definitely doesn't do less. She definitely does more damage now. And then also tackling the issue or the question of whether Sue Storm is for PvE or PvP. I honestly think she's for PvE. Personally, but we're gonna wait and see here. So we're gonna do 2, cancel into 3, and then we're gonna do 4, insta cancel 5. It's gonna give us the buff on 5, and as you can see there, even with all the hits, she does under a bar. Now, again, this might not seem like a huge difference in damage, and you're right, it's probably not a huge difference in damage. We may notice a larger change in the damage if we go ahead and use a damage proc and use a chain hit damage for a CTP, because again, she's hitting way more hits, 59 versus 25, and those 59 hits will take advantage of a chain hit damage, even if it's just 20% chain hit damage increase or 25, depending on the proc. But on top of that, we have to address the fact that with her base look, with her base kit, you can't really use her first skill. So we're going to go back in one more time, and we're going to splash in the first skill at the end of the combo. And you're going to see how little damage the first skill does, and how awkward the damage, or how awkward the skill is for her base uniform. So take a look here. We're going to do the same combo again. We're going to wait for him to teleport, and then we're going to hit him with a 2 into 3, and then we're going to do immediately 4 into 5, and then we're going to, once we land, we're going to do 1, and she kind of jumps back and she does a couple of hits. Did you notice that? The bar moved. It kind of tickled forward. You see how much damage that did? It did like this much damage, like a 20th of a bar. Okay, so there we go. That's the full rotation. A full proc with this setup for Invisible Woman, with my Invisible Woman, does 1 bar's worth of damage without a damage proc. Now we're going to go back and we're going to add her first skill, and you can see how much smoother it is when you add her first skill. This is a very in-depth take, by the way, at a character's skills, and I just want to point this out because I do think, in a way, you're going to split hairs for this uniform. So it kind of feeds into my final verdict for the uniform and my final review. But now let's splash in the first skill for Invisible Woman at the beginning. So we're going to do 2, 3, we're going to do all the way, and then we're going to do 1, 4, 5. And you can cancel 1 and 4 the same way. So now you can see we do a little bit more damage because the first skill actually does a little bit more than nothing. And if we actually just do the 4th skill here, you'll see that it actually does a little bit more damage, maybe double the damage of her old first skill. Still not a lot, maybe like 1/18 of a bar, but it's a little bit more. So you can see she's a little bit closer to a bar and a half. So with a full rotation, she's like at a bar and a third, a bar and a half, whereas with the old uniform, she's at a bar. What does that basically mean? Well, it means 2 things. 1, the uniform is an upgrade for Sue Storm, and 2, she is a PvE character. What does it also mean for the uniform? You probably don't need it. That's kind of my final verdict. I don't think it does enough for the character. I think if you're a die-hard Sue Storm fan, you're going to pick up this uniform anyways. But I think for everybody else, you can honestly just skip it. I don't think the collection bonus for having all of these uniforms at Mythic is worthwhile to begin with. Let me just remind myself of what the bonus reward is. It's just some crystals and then some Chaos Nornstones. You don't really need this. I honestly think this is a uniform that you can skip. And you can use Sue Storm for the same things that used her before. She has the same all defense down on her 3rd skill as a striker. She has the same 5 seconds of charm, and I still think that she's going to be ineffective in PvP, so you're really only going to be getting it for PvE. And she is going to be better now, but it's pretty marginal. Hopefully in the future, Netmarble makes better uniforms for characters, and they, if they're going to put in the work for the animations, because the skill effects are beautiful. Having Johnny come in and spin that, big Magician's Red fireball thing and having the kind of hashtag force collision. She's got really beautiful skill animations, but they just don't go anywhere. You don't have to make the character necessarily OP, but just add some interesting effects. Be a little bit more creative with the actual skills and the actual impact that the character has in the game. I feel like a lot of the creativity in Marvel Future Fight is used up. Like 90% of the creativity is used up on the look of the uniform and the look of the skills, the animations, and then you just have 10% left over for really boring, uninspired uniform bonuses like 10% energy attack and skill effects like 3 seconds of bind instead of 2, and then 2 seconds of bind instead of 3. So ultimately, this uniform is a skip for the vast majority of players. Up next is either going to be Human Torch or Thing. Hopefully you guys are ready for GBR, for Galactus, because it's coming in an hour. We'll be live on Twitch in about 8 hours at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you do not want to miss that for your chance to get carried by me or someone else in the chat that wants to help you. Subscribe if you enjoy the content, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you later today. Good luck for Silver Surfer. Take care.